down. Press, and we'll get her rib cage coming in and stretching out through her abdominals here. Pulling back, so we want this stretch opposite this kind of pinch. I'll push more of an overlap here as we feel that her oblique compress. Pushing up against her iliac crest here for her hip. And this is going to step down, and let's also come back and find medius, gluteus maximus. Pulling around. So, again, I'm trying to work around the form here rather than going down one side all the way. So let's complete the form for hips. And this leg is relatively straight, but we are kind of looking down at it because of our eye level sitting around here. So we would actually be seeing that turning down like this. And let's get this straight. So biceps group here, pulling into this tendon on the outside. This would be attaching to our fibula, running down to malleolus here. That pad back here into calf. And on the opposite side, so one thing here is to watch out for where the legs start. So this leg is pulling in from our hips here. So as we get that far leg, we can actually drop that down a little bit lower to show that tilt of our hips, right? So if we pull this down from here, that's going to help it feel like her hips are tilting away. And we'll get our foot. I'll kind of indicate it for now. And we get whatever this is, deltoid up here, pulling around. This pull from her lats and teres major, and her arm is going to come up here. Feel that turning away. Elbow stretch. And, once you kind of get that major gesture down, it's really about just getting other things to kind of reinforce that. So I'll just kind of indicate something for here. These are, in terms of the gesture, these are less important than, say, her legs. And I'm being a little loosey-goosey here. All right, so this leg back. This arm can push back as well. Let's see. How long did it take you to reach this amount of skill in drawing the body? I have been drawing for a long time. It's been about 10 years, I think, more than 10 years at this point. I feel that I have a moderate understanding of general anatomy on linear figures where landmarks are more visible, but I struggle with putting body fat on bigger figures, especially from imagination. Do you have any advice? That's a good question. A big part of that is kind of understanding how kind of fat forms in the body, and you can kind of, there aren't really any diagrams that I've seen so much that kind of show that. A lot of it is just kind of from practice, and what you're going to find is that things tend to flow around joints and connections. So on our torso here, if we have, as an example, we have our rib cage and our pelvis, what happens is the in between areas tend to be where fat and things form. Same thing with limbs. If we have the joint of our knee here, it's the areas around it that tend to have more of the fat. And this is where, at the joints, tends to be where you see more of the kind of pinch and things like that. So the thing about the figure is that the joints, because we have to be mobile, areas where things connect that have to bend, that tends to be those tend to be areas where fat doesn't form so readily. So that's something to look out for, is understand the joints of the figure in terms of the bones and things. Yeah, I'll try to answer questions before in between these sets, but go ahead. Sorry.
I can also ask you a question, read them off if you want, or it's up to you. But really quickly, I've seen a book actually with a fat deposit diagram,
Oh yeah, really?
and it's the Sarah Simblett Anatomy for Artists book.
Oh, okay. I
There's one page, like it's not a lot of
what?
information at all.
Okay.
It's one diagram of where fat deposits are on the body. But yeah,
Yeah.
for me, you just it's through experience really of what we've
Yeah,
noticed.
yeah. Um, yeah, that's a tricky thing. I don't actually own that book. I should pick that up. I've seen that book a lot, but I haven't purchased it. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a few things. Oh, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
it's all good. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say also there's a few diagrams in the Gottfried Bomis book. Um, I don't know if it's I don't know what's in that other book, but yeah, there are a few places that have like one or two diagrams that you'll find, but otherwise it's kind of tricky. Um, anyway, just this here. All right, so getting into this pose is a little trickier. So we're getting more of a counterbalance to her weight, so she's definitely supported on this, but we want to make sure that her body here is far enough to the right so that she doesn't fall over. So body is naturally counterbalancing this, and I am just adjusting my initial gesture to meet that. And it's coming out, so this leg is coming towards us. Leg is coming back. This leg is going down. This arm is going away from us, and we're seeing this kind of roll back of her chest, this tilt back of her hips. Um, so I'll set that up. And when you guys are doing these gestures, it's okay to get a little messy with these. You'll find that your pencil can go quite a bit darker, and as you kind of start to finish the drawing, a lot of that construction will kind of disappear. So uh, I'm not too worried, especially with these quicker poses, about making everything so pretty. Also with these demos where I'm using a lot more construction, uh, things tend to get a little messy just because of the process here, but that's all right. So here too, we get the stretch in her neck, pulling down to wherever this is. This is going to pull down to pit of the neck here. Let's also, I guess we should establish her rib cage a little bit here. Sternum, this is going to open up. And we get oblique pulling into our pelvis here. Okay, clavicle rolling around. And we'll feel the front plane or the top of her shoulder. So with this, that we have this kind of ball over her shoulder as her humerus pulls out. What I'm really thinking about is reinforcing that sense of the cylinder here. So I'm using that as an excuse to roll around here to reinforce the perspective, and in turn, kind of the movement of her arm. Let's get this pulling around here. And her hand comes out. I'll put an indication of that for now. And we also have this shoulder turning out, down. So same thing here. We're going to feel that roll of her, that humerus here, pulling in underneath that acromion process, getting this pull across. That's coming in, rib cage. We can feel, we'll get an indication here of a breast pulling around here. Same thing on this side. And we get this pinch. So again, I'm thinking about this stretch and pinch here. This will pull up. And we're going to feel that oblique pull around. And let's come across and find the other side of that. So this side, again, is kind of stretching. So feel that turn in here. This will pull down. Sternum, this will open up. And we will see center line pull into belly button here. And let's, we can bring in an indication here of her abdominals pulling down. So on this side, I want to pull more of that stretch. And on this side, we can push a little bit of a break here to emphasize that pinch. So again, like everything I do, I'm thinking about the gesture, right? So everything kind of comes back to reinforcing that movement. Let's see. So this comes out. We get this overlap. Let's push this around here. And pulling across her leg, we're going to feel that sartorius cut through down to her knee. And as we get her knee, this is going to pull out. And we're going to feel that kind of top plane of her patella here. And on the inside, we are getting an indication here of that medialis muscle there. This rolls down. And this is going to turn down. And we'll follow the gesture of her shin into that malleolus on the ankle. And then behind that, we'll get our calf. And then on the other side, we're probably seeing tibialis anterior. So this will come down. But and let's kind of flesh out this knee a little bit. So from that patella, we're going to feel the step down a little bit more so we can get that tibial nose. And this is all going down. We can kind of knock this all back here. And on this leg here, we can step down, have that kind of three-finger gap, groin, adductor, and we're going to feel that sartorius. I'm going to pull this leg out just a little bit more than what I've indicated. Pulling down into that tendon. Let's see, this will come down. So from the sartorius, we're going to get this kind of S curve. This flows down to the bottom of the knee. It actually ends just about at that tibial nose here. And then we can follow this curve, this S curve here through to the malleolus on her ankle. So we can use that gesture here to help us construct that leg. And this foot comes down. And we'll just put an indication there of that foot for now. And this arm is coming towards us, so we are getting this kind of twist with this arm. So this will come out. And we'll get triceps in the back, coming in along, lining up with deltoid here along this axis. We get this supinated group. And so as her hand pulls out like this, we see the back of her hand. We're getting this kind of ridge muscle twist across like this. So we want to show that form pulling around here. And I'll just indicate something for a hand for now. Let's see, and we get this, and I'll just indicate something for now. Let's see, maybe we can do a longer pose at the end, just so we can kind of get into some of the nitty gritty here. These are just kind of simple, a little more diagrammatic here. Let's see, let's grab another page here. And let's find another pose. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just read them as they come. Which proportions are the most important? Yeah, yeah, you can see when I was setting these up, I did a little measurement. I don't get too specific in the beginning, but the big things I do look at would be, so let's, we can draw this pose out here. I'm just setting up my general proportions of the body here, the torso, where rib cage to the sorry, the pit of the neck to the bottom of the rib cage to the bottom of the hips is about the same, and another one of those distances is where your head sits, and then from there I'll go head to the groin, and that will take us just about to the bottom of the legs here. So my whole goal initially is to get the entire figure down as quickly as possible. So I'm looking at these really large, broad proportions. And if I mark off the feet like this, it doesn't take much to just bring our feet down to that line. And you can see immediately we start to get a sense of the entire figure without too much fuss, right? And as long as you get that overall proportion, in ballpark, it doesn't have to be super accurate, or at least I'm not worried too much about that. Then you can always come in and do smaller proportional measurements. But what I find tends to happen, especially if you go like head, there's always kind of a drift with that, right? So you do one head, the next head is a little bigger, the next head is a little smaller. So things tend to get a little bit wonkier when you're dealing with small increments. So I tend to go as broadly as possible, just halfway, right? Just half, half, and half. And that's another thing too, is I try to break things into half, because halves, thirds, and quarters are easy to kind of understand. But when you're talking about like 7.5 heads or even 8 heads, it gets a little difficult. So yeah, those are the proportions that I'm looking at right off the bat. And once we get this, things are well enough established that we can kind of go ahead and jump into this. Let's adjust this here.
That was an amazing answer. I guess this one is appropriate for now. Any tips on how the shoulder blades move and position?
Yeah, the shoulder blades are. That's a big question. Yeah, the shoulder blades do move quite a bit. The thing to look at is, what are the arms doing? If you're not sure where the shoulder blades are, that will always be kind of an indicator of what's happening. So, in this arm, for example, this is lifting up towards us like this, so it's going back. And what happens with the shoulder blades is it's going to follow that. So in this case, we see the shoulder blades pick up, and we actually see this slight kind of shelf underneath them here as that lifts up with the arm. You can almost think of this as one complete section like this that moves together. And the other thing is going to be if your shoulder blades, or if your arms, sorry, are moving up or if they're going away like this. So when your arms lift up like this, the scapula, the shoulder blades will rotate out and they'll rotate around like this. So they're going to actually appear more at an angle, and they will also appear thinner because they're rotating around the figure like this here. And as your arm pulls back like this, what's happening is your scapula is pulling out. So you're going to see that a lot thinner and pull away. The other extreme would be if your arms are going back like this. What's going to happen is your scapula are going to get compressed inwards like this. So you feel more of this compression, and you might see this kind of pinch on the trapezius like that. So look at the arms so if you kind of understand how the scapula move with the arms, then you can kind of look to the arms to help you kind of decide what the scapula are actually doing. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see, let's set up a little bit more construction here. So I'll do one more of these, and then maybe we can do something a little different. But this will come out. And we'll get our arm across, and we get triceps moving behind. And let's, I'm giving her a big rib cage. Let's narrow that out just a little bit here. So we'll feel more of this stretch coming down. We'll again get her hips. Let's emphasize this kind of pinch in here. And we'll feel her obliques come in, and there's something sneaky going on here with this pose that I'll point out in a second. Let's close this off. We'll step down into that sacrum here. So yeah, with this pose, the sneaky thing, normally we would say that because she's resting on this leg, this is a straight leg, we'd see her hips kind of tilting this way more. But she's actually kind of pushing up on her toe down here, which is straightening out her hips. You actually see that happen a lot with like dancers. They will push up their hips, and it's meant to give the illusion that they're floating. So you got to be kind of careful with that when you're making your analysis here in terms of what the legs are doing. So there's not really any guaranteed rule for any of this stuff, but something to think about. It's always going to be that need for analysis of what the model's doing. So we get adductor here. It's going to come down. Uh-oh. It's also a good idea to have a bunch of pencils sharpened up and ready to go.
Kirk, is it important to hold the pencil like this?
What was that? Sorry.
Is it
What did you say?
important to learn how to draw holding the pencil the way you're drawing?
Oh, it's not necessary. It kind of depends on what you want to do with it, but um, this is, I guess, if you want those fancy calligraphic lines, then yes, it is. But this is definitely something I practiced a lot. I didn't start off drawing like this. I know it's really awkward when you first start off trying to hold it like this. It's just that, you can get a much broader variety of line work. And the other thing about it is that as you're drawing, because you're pulling along the length of the barrel, or you're dragging it across, with every stroke, you're actually kind of sharpening the pencil versus holding it like this and digging into the tip and flattening it. So this actually does allow you to draw a little bit longer without the need to sharpen your pencil. On top of that, there are a number of things you can think about with the line weight. So if you're able to manipulate that, for example, if we draw like a cylinder here, every form can have kind of a top and bottom, and you can indicate or suggest weight to a form by giving it a harder or darker line. You can also indicate a sense of light and shadow by, using darker or harder lines, or also, like with the figure, for example, we can indicate these straight, hard lines versus these softer, wispier lines to communicate the difference between bone and tendon and flesh. So yeah, it kind of depends what you want to do. But if I'm drawing in like my sketchbook and stuff, I'll with a pen or whatever, I'll hold it with the pen grip more. I feel like this might be kind of specific to figure this type of drawing, I suppose. And I guess it's meant to imitate more of like a brush. And let's see, so we have this coming across. And her arm's coming out here. So come out, and we get this pinch for her scapula pulling out. Let's also define this coming around here. And I'm making some adjustments as I go. That's all right. All right, and we're getting this kind of pinch in here. Across to her scapula, turning under. So I'm going to exaggerate this. And yeah, these anatomy here is getting a little pushed, mainly because I'm trying to explain all this stuff as I go. It tend to overstate a lot of things. All right, let's see. Let's find some different poses.
All right, I got a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's another one. When are you drawing, or when you are drawing from reference, are you trying to capture the shape of the muscle by simplifying it?
Yeah, generally, well, it kind of depends too. Everything depends. But yeah, no, when I'm drawing from, um, yeah, reference, it's always going to be kind of a back and forth between, do you want to simplify or over exaggerate certain things, or do you want to kind of, do you see something in the reference that looks aesthetically pleasing, or you like the way that it is in the reference? Um, so I'll kind of, it kind of depends what I want to do with the drawing. So sometimes I'll use things that I see in the reference and draw them exactly as I see them because I think it looks cool, or I think it helps the pose or the drawing. And sometimes I'll look at something and say, oh, that's, yeah, it's maybe too complicated. Let's simplify it. Or maybe it's too soft or too simple. Then I might, let's pull that muscle out a little bit more to evoke a certain feeling or something like that, right? So it all kind of depends, and as you draw more and more and you get a better sense of what you want out of your drawing, you'll have a better idea of, things you can subdue, things you can pull forward, and it's just building your that design sensibility, right? Let's see. So draw this kind of a bit more of a reclining pose. So we have the stretch coming across this way here, I would say, and maybe this shoulder is dropping down a little bit. And overall, her body is swinging back here. And we can get our legs coming through. So again, we can find this broad measurement here to get us into that ballpark. And let's pull this leg forward. And this will drop down, and we'll get this coming forward here. So I'll, another important thing is if you have a model resting on something, it's good practice to try to include that. A lot of times that will help you understand the perspective a little bit better, especially if it's something more geometric like this chair. And also, it just makes it so it doesn't feel like your figure's floating on the page. So it's good idea to include that stuff.
Kirk, Emily said, my teacher went to Art Center and he said they were encouraged to yell when placing gesture lines. Is that true?
To yell when placing gesture, I don't know about that. Huh. It's funny because my teacher at Art Center was like, she was really soft spoken and very gentle. I couldn't imagine her
Yeah, maybe it's
telling us to do
internally.
something like that.
Any tips on finding your own anatomy shorthand?
That really comes with practice, but it's kind of like, I'm sure you've heard the advice of when you're, don't look like finding your own style, quote unquote. But looking at other artists is a good way to do it, right? How do other artists draw like a deltoid? How do other artists draw X or whatever it might be? Find an artist that you like, and study and copy what they do, and find another artist that does it a different way and study and copy it the way they do, and eventually you kind of, just like with your style, you come up with your own ideas of what you like to see, and you can go from there. So I'm very I studied a lot of like Michelangelo and Rubens and all those classical artists, old masters when I was in school. So that has a big influence on the way I draw, in terms of how I design the anatomy and stuff. As I moved into more animation, that also influenced how I draw. So my style started to change quite a bit, and the aesthetics I had started to change. But all those things are still there. It's just a matter of, um, it just sort of becomes its own thing after they all get mixed together in that pot, right? So here I'm being a little less, doing a little less construction and being a little more direct with some of this stuff here. But you can see I'm still bracketing, still finding these two sides. Let's relate those together. We can get clavicle here. Find this wrapping up and around. So here I might think when I draw more like this, I'm thinking more about design and how I might. Well, it's always there, but um, big thing with this, for example, I really want to push this movement of her body flowing down. So even as I draw things like her breast here, you don't want to just draw them like this. I'm pulling them off of that gesture here. So, and things like her belly button, I'm gonna pull this with that gesture instead of just drawing a little mark like that. So eventually, the more comfortable you get with the anatomy and stuff, you can start to think about that design aspect to it a little bit more. So side we get rib cage coming down, and we are getting this pinch for her obliques. Again, you see everything that I do, I'm trying to follow this gesture here. And let's break that a little bit. Let's put an area of contrast here where you get our hips really pushing up against that chair here. And this leg is going to come forward. Get this break of her adductors, and then we feel that sartorius cut through. And let's think about this volume here. So this will pull forward. Vastus lateralis. Straight of this tendon coming in. And before I go too far with this leg, let's jump around a little bit. Maybe you can flesh out her torso a little bit more. So get her ribcage pinching, and we feel this compression against her abdominals here. So again, with these, thinking about that gesture first and foremost. So let's get these moving with that. Get the volume of her ribcage completing through here. And then we step down for her, whatever that is, her oblique here. And then opposite that, we're also going to get pulling some of the shadow. So here we're finding the edge of her rib cage opening up into a thoracic arch. And then we feel this edge of her abdominals here. And this is going to pull in underneath her belly button. And we come back around her oblique here. So that shadow shape, we can use that to help us reinforce that gesture. And here, this comes down. And this is rolling into her iliac crest, stepping down. And this leg is going to stretch out. And I feel like it is kind of coming towards us a little bit. So let's as I address her knee, for example, I'm pushing this around to reinforce that movement. And I probably have this a little bit short. That's all right. Maybe we'll just adjust that a little bit. And this knee comes in. Step into that tibial nose here. So I'm always looking to find the joints and build around those. So once I get this, we can come down and follow that shin bone here into her foot. Calf. The elder malleolus here. Into her foot. Another good thing to practice is get in the habit of always drawing hands and feet when you have the opportunity. The thing I always see students do is they'll be drawing an arm and they'll come down to the wrist, and I'll see them stop for a little bit and think about it, and then they'll just go and draw somewhere else. But it's, even if it's just as simple as this, just put something in there. Get in the habit of doing that, and over time, you'll get better at it. But if you keep avoiding it, you're never going to get better at drawing those hands.
Put them in the pockets and put grass over the feet.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Don't put grass over the feet. Just draw them out.
Let's see here. How important do you think speed is while drawing? Do you think it's important to set a timer when learning?
So there's a reason for doing quicker poses and a reason for doing longer poses. Generally speaking, don't worry about speed. Just go at whatever pace you need to get things done. The reason we do, let's say, like 2-minute poses, is because the time forces you to think about specific things. Because a lot of times, and I see that happen with students a lot, is that they'll jump into like doing really specific details right off the bat, right? When you only have 2 minutes, it forces you, because you don't have the time, then you really have to just focus on the gesture, right? So it's that limitation is there to get you to do something specific. But generally, I would say, don't worry. And even in 2 minutes, it's not really about how fast you draw, but it's about making good decisions, right? If you can, instead of drawing super fast and doing all these lines here, if you just slow down and spend the same amount of time, but you just draw the one line that you want after feeling it out a little bit, that's better than doing all this, right? And over time, the more you practice doing those good decisions, you get quicker at making those decisions, right? But you kind of have to slow down to speed up. That sounds kind of weird. But if you want to get good at doing quick sketch, do longer poses. And if you want to not have your long poses feel very stiff and things like that, you want to do some quick sketch.
Okay, got another one here. Do you do these kind of studies digitally? If so, do you have any tips for getting comfortable at drawing digitally?
Yeah, I do these a lot actually. If you have a YouTube channel, if you see the stream, I every now and then I'll stream some figure drawing sets like this.
Kirk's on all the time. I see him on YouTube streaming.
Yeah, it's just practice, and I would say don't overcomplicate the process, right? I just pick like one brush and just stick with that through the whole drawing. And it's a really simple brush too. It's just something with like a pressure sensitivity for the line thickness, kind of like a brush pen. Just keep it simple and just start drawing with that. You know, and essentially, when I draw digitally or when I paint digitally and stuff, I tend to make it as close as possible as my own process for painting and drawing traditionally. So it's usually just like one or two brushes. The main, I think the best thing digitally is just being able to use different layers. So I might do like my underdrawing here on one layer, and then I can knock it back and then do the finish on top on a different layer, right? Um, but yeah, other than that, it's just a ton of practice, and the skills you learn doing things traditionally will directly translate to digital work because it doesn't matter if you have a stylus or a pen or a pencil. You're still drawing, and drawing is not really about the marks you make, but it's how you break things down and think about form and stuff like that. Let's see. Let's find another pose here. So let's see. All right. So yeah, maybe we can do a little bit looser here. Or maybe a bit more direct. Yeah, if I'm, oh, good, yep. Past the spine, that will depend on the pose. A lot of times it's going to run through a leg or something. And kind of like what I was mentioning earlier. When you look at like the weight distribution, let's say you have a pose like this where somebody's doing this, right? What is that leg doing here? But we might get the action going through here, but what you'll notice is that pushes into the hips, and then we get that kind of flowing into the leg like this, right? So that's kind of where the movement goes. So something like this, for example, this flows down. Maybe it does kind of come out into this leg, and we get a transition here. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what the pose is, but if you're moving down the spine, that probably means you're going to be moving into the legs. So here with this, let's actually push her, open up her shoulders here, so we're kind of looking into them. And then we want to push her head down a little bit, so we really get her leaning into this pose. And a lot of times as I set up things like the gesture, I'm kind of acting out the pose in my mind, like imagining I'm in that pose to kind of feel where that tension is, where's the weight. So here we have the stretch in her neck, and we really feel her shoulders kind of come up and over here. Romian process. Stretch in her neck, and then we feel this whole thing kind of roll forward. Uh, Awkward or disproportionate. I think the main thing is just setting up your proportions in the beginning and kind of slowing down to line things up a little bit more. So I'm really looking at like pose in twists. It's all about that center line, right? So you can have the exact same shape for your figure, but depending on what you do with that center line, that will tell a very different story, right? So with this, what I'm really focusing on is looking at the elements that follow her center. So like the pit of her neck, for example, here pointing out in this way, versus things like her belly button pointing out this way, right? And if you can get those to kind of oppose each other, you're probably going to get a pretty good twist. And then, yeah, as far as getting the things not to go kind of crazy, let's just slow down a little bit and make sure we get our structure for things like our rib cage and stuff set up properly. So I'm not afraid to just, draw right through this arm to make sure that that volume is correct. It's good to kind of get in that habit. Um, and then we can find her obliques in here and then obliques on this side. So I'm still following that same kind of bracketing idea here. And we can adjust this a little bit. Let's get this hip coming back. So here we can actually box our hips out a little bit if we want to really make that solid. And that's really going to reinforce that shift in the angle. So our rib cage is going to be pushing over. We're going to feel thoracic arch coming through here. And as she twists, we do get these pinches coming around from her side here. And her belly button will also help reinforce that if we design it as a shape, move with that gesture. And this might transition into her abdominals here. Get the side of her oblique in here. Get the other side of her abdominals here. And arm coming down. It's gonna shift a little bit. That's all right. We'll just push this hand behind. And another thing, to kind of think about is that I'm not too worried about making this look exactly like the reference. So if things change, like for example, I got push this arm in a different place, I'll just kind of roll with it, and try to make the drawing itself work. Because at the end of the day, the model will step off the stage or the reference won't be there, and it's only your drawing that people are going to look at, right? So I'm more kind of responding to what the drawing needs as opposed to how to make it look more like the reference that I see. That's different from, I might try to capture the energy of the reference. That tends to be more what I'm thinking about as far as, well, actually using the reference, right? But yeah, don't get too caught up in making everything line up perfectly, because it's not going to happen. So this leg is, what is it doing? Who knows? Yeah. How do the legs connect to the torso? That is a of a big question, but we can, we can jump into it really quick. The one thing I will say is that when we are standing upright, we have your hips here. Your legs will your hips will come down, and your legs actually attach a little bit below the top of the iliac crest here, your pelvis, and they swing in from the back of your butt. So a big thing with the legs is that they actually do overlap on top of that hip box that we think of. And so when you lift your leg up, it actually swings from the bottom of your butt like this. So a common thing that I see that you want to avoid is drawing your hips and then drawing the legs below it like this. You always want to think about it actually starting on the front of the hips, right? Or if you're bending a leg, you don't want to bend the leg from down here like this, right? It should stem from in front. So as I draw this leg, for example, you can see that I'm overlapping that volume on top of this hip box here. It was a very kind of simplified answer. That's one big thing that you kind of want to be thinking about in terms of connecting it. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a cylinder socketing onto a box like this. It's not too much more complicated than that. Well, it kind of is if you get into all the anatomy. But as far as a simple form, right, that's what I am really thinking about. Let's see. So this comes forward here. Back of the leg, biceps group, pulling into this tendon. And we feel this, so, there obviously are some muscles in here going on. This is the tensor muscle coming in. Glutes rolling around here. Vastus lateralis. Coming in. And we have that knee rolling around here. And calf coming down. So maybe let's find that malleolus here. And I'm calling out all this anatomy. It probably might not mean anything to you guys, to a lot of you, but it's just to point out that everything I do, I'm there is kind of a reason for it. Every kind of mark that I make, and it's either based on the anatomy or just simply what I want to do with the gesture. So it's either going to be an anatomical thing that I'm calling out, or something that I want to say design to pull with the gesture here. And if it doesn't do kind of one or ideally both of those things, then usually I'll kind of omit it or leave it out.
All right, get ready for this next question, Kirk.
Yep, go ahead.
What are you, Kirk, personally striving towards getting better at in your figure drawing currently?
What am I striving? That is a very good question, and a tricky question. I don't know. A big thing I think about nowadays when I'm doing figure drawing is really just kind of exploring different styles, finding interesting ways of describing things or designing things. Because obviously, like, I'm still learning stuff about anatomy and stuff like that. It's kind of an ongoing thing. Every time, I'll always skim through some anatomy stuff and find something interesting that I didn't really think about. But yeah, the big thing is just looking at different styles and coming up with interesting ways of communicating things. So, I'll be copying other artists and things like that and trying to think about, why they're doing the things they're doing, and seeing if I can incorporate some of that into my own drawing.
Has this always been a thing, or like when you were starting out, did you have a different focus?
Oh yeah, definitely starting out, I was just like, how to draw a box, how do I draw anatomy and stuff. Um, but once you kind of get comfortable with that, there's a whole nother game beyond that, right?
Mm.
And that's, what do you do with a drawing, right? It's because it's not just drawing for the sake of drawing, but yeah, kind of giving it a bit more of a purpose, and that doesn't have to be like professional. It could just be your own personal desire and what you want to see or discover new things. And a big part of it for me really is just I just like the feeling of the pencil on the paper and stuff like that. So uh, I almost don't really care what it looks like as long as I had fun drawing it,
I kind
the
of relate to that
experience.
a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll just do like whatever. And if you see like all my old pads, like there'll be like a really more kind of academic classical drawing, and then the next page will be something really scribbly and cartoony and random. So yeah, I'm just kind of having fun most of the time. But if I do sit down and think about it, that's yeah, I'm thinking about kind of, I guess, problem solving, different ways of solving the problem, right?
Um,
But yeah, nothing beat like doing this now after not doing a lot of traditional. This feels amazing. The pencil on the paper. I'm like, oh man, this is great. But yeah, maybe we'll do one more here, and we can
oh yeah,
call
what
it a
time
day
is
for
it?
this workshop.
3:23. Oh, we're doing good. Yeah, hour and a half. What tips do you have for doing live sketching where people are constantly walking or moving?
Oh, like the people that you're drawing, I suppose.
Michelle, do you mean like the
Yes,
model, or do you mean like people in
pe
public,
people around you.
like you're outside in public?
Live sketching. Oh yeah. So one thing to kind of practice, and this gets into like the time like drawing quickly that was asked earlier. I'll have students do like 1 minute poses, right? And with the 1 minute poses, obviously it's not about getting all the detail there, but it's about honing your ability to kind of see the overall pose all at once, right? So like when I look at this pose, for example, my initial kind of reaction, right? If I'm just drawing a really simple thing, is that she's going like this, and I can just glance at it and kind of pick up on this gesture here, right? This looks kind of silly, but we could take this and flesh it out. We have all the information we need to continue this, right? And it's about honing your ability to doing these really quick like 1 minute poses, is honing your ability to see that initial kind of silhouette and initial action. And I think of it like you build your Terminator vision, where you kind of look around the room and he like outlines people, and there's like a list of things about them that are pertinent. Um, so at first glance, if you can get that initial uh, idea down of what they're doing, then as people move around, you have your pose locked down in the first few seconds. Then you can just use that person as reference, right? Are they wearing baseball cap? What kind of cap are they wearing? Maybe they have a sweater on. Who knows? But then you can kind of fill in the blanks here as far as the details, without having to have that person stand still, right? Um, so you just need to get that initial gesture down. Yeah, there you go. Does the does the jacket fit? Get that initial gesture down, and then you can kind of sort of use the person that's walking around as reference, right? So it's good to kind of like watch people, and then they might kind of strike a pose for half a second that you like, and then you can just really quickly kind of block that in, whatever they're doing, and then you can take your time after that to kind of flesh it out. But the initial sort of analysis of what that gesture is the real key. doing it. So hopefully that makes sense. And you can obviously kind of push the proportions and stuff as you do that. Whatever. But that's kind of, at least that's what I kind of focus on when I'm doing that. Or that's a strategy I use to help. So let's see, we got this tilt here. We got lifting up her leg here, and her arm comes back and does something. So this is a little bit bigger here, so I guess we can spend a little more time doing stuff.
Any tips on keeping the planes of the body separate without relying too heavily on tone and shading?
You want to think about corners. Um, so, yeah, the main thing. So, and that comes down to like your construction, right? So, if you think about if you're drawing a box here, for example, you can have the shape of the box, right? And it's a flat shape until we actually include this inside corner here, and suddenly that inside form comes forward. So the same thing applies to a person. If we're drawing, for example, a torso here, we can have kind of a flat shape until we start to add elements that fall on the corners here. This, and maybe we also include center line, right? But you can see the details that I'm putting on this person are the ones that fall along this corner axis here. So it's just like the box. And once we do that, we start to understand that we have a front and side plane. So whenever especially if I'm just doing a line drawing, that's the main thing I'll focus on. So where are the corners of the form? That's the important thing.
Wow.
So like her head, for example. Oh, go ahead. Do you have a
Great
question?
tip. Sorry, just I'm mind blown.
Oh, like her head here, I'm thinking about her eyebrows being this corner, and you can see that this is lining up with the corner of the shape of her hair here. So those two together start to define for us the plane of her head. And I might even, it's not necessarily toning it out, but I might even go ahead and do something like this to show her cheek and do something like that. And suddenly we have kind of the planes of her head here. So, yeah, and it's kind of why I focus so heavily on construction when I'm like teaching and stuff, because when we're drawing a box and things, when we're applying anatomy to it, it's not really about just putting the anatomy there, but it's about kind of understanding what anatomy relates to the actual corners of the box, right? And once you kind of understand those alignments, then you can pull out certain forms that will help you kind of that kind of fall in those corners, right? So, yeah, construction is key if you to really kind of understand this. But anyway, yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, you really want to go out of your way to do the construction, because then you're kind of just forcing yourself to put uh, put a word or an idea to what you know is there, I guess. And also looking at other artists. So you might look at always bring up Renaissance artists because they're so exaggerated. But finding a similar pose that they've done, and they're probably going to show you more of the anatomy that would be there if it wasn't just kind of a normal person. So that can kind of help you understand what is um, what is below the surface without getting when the information is not there. And the more you understand about the anatomy or more you practice it, the more you actually see that that might be like super subtle that you might not really understand initially, you know. So also practice.
Practice.
Experience.
How do you apply these studies to your own style?
To my own style.
I think this is
Yeah,
similar
a
to
big
what we've answered before. Like, just don't
yeah.
think about style too much.
Yeah, don't think about style. I mean, one of the big benefits of doing these kind of studies is just the experience factor, you know. So like as an example, how do you draw somebody with, their leg coming towards you and their foot, you get like a crazy foreshortened pose like this. Um, you'll have a much better idea of how to do that if you've practiced that kind of angle 100 times, over and over. So a big thing with just figure drawing and stuff is that the model will present you with poses and angles and things that you might not necessarily expect, right? And a good idea is instead of moving to a different place or jumping to another reference image, is just try and draw that as awkward as it might be, because it will just add to your experience in terms of what you're familiar with. So yeah, beyond style, I mean, honestly, that kind of comes. Part of it is just like the exploration of it, as you're drawing. Um, but more of that comes from looking at other artists, I would say. But for studies like this, that it's that experience factor of having drawn something through studying, hundreds of times. Then when that same kind of thing presents itself in another situation, you're ready. Um, it's like wax on, wax off, right? You, you have that reaction of just being able to, you know, understand what's
It'll
going
come to
on.
you. You'll
Yeah,
know.
yeah, exactly. Won't make sense now, but yeah, when it happens, yeah.
Do you think there are any disadvantages to studying from photos versus life?
Yeah, nothing quite beats life, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and a big part of it is, well, at least when you're first starting off, what I found was really helpful was being able to do that, like move around the figures. So if I'm not sure what's going on, it helps to look at things from a different angle. You see things as three-dimensional. Um, Sometimes with photography, it'll obscure certain details, or with the lighting, it's like a weird lighting situation, and you can't quite get a better view of it. Yeah, I wish I could just go figure drawing right now. So, that's not to say reference isn't bad. Obviously it's better than no reference. So, I was fortunate enough, when I was learning to essentially have access to life drawing pretty much every single day. So like, while I was in school, I I was basically life drawing every single day.
Have you been going at all?
No, not recently. I don't really go outside anymore.
Caroline said, "Do you bother doing full construction for really foreshortened poses?"
Uh, Usually no. But if you're trying to understand it and to practice, I suggest you try it. Just to really test yourself on your construction and stuff.
And I will ask a follow-up question for Caroline. Do you have any tips on drawing anime?
On anime, um, that is kind of different from figure drawing. That is more of a stylistic thing in terms of looking at other artists.
Caroline's so mad right now.
Yeah, typical Carol.
Wow, okay.
All right, I got one that we skipped earlier. Do you have any tips for drawing wrinkly old people?
Wrinkly old people. Hmm. A lot of I feel like to really draw wrinkly old people, you really have to know your anatomy. Because like the anatomy shows through so much. Those honestly, like wrinkly old people are the funnest to draw because of that fact. It's like a chance to like to go crazy and draw everything you know. Because when you're drawing like young people like this, a lot of times you're oversimplifying things. You don't want to overstate the anatomy. Um, but yeah, with old people, you can go crazy and have fun. But yeah, I mean, you got to really know your bone structure and all that jazz.
I hope I got through everybody's questions. What time is it? 3:40. An
340,
hour and
yeah.
40 minute. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Kirk, thank you so much. I'll let you finish
Yeah,
out this
no
post
problem.
and then we'll wrap it up. Does
Cool.
anybody else have any questions before we? Oh, there was one about lighting.
Oh yeah.
Um, can you ask again if I've skipped? Sorry, Ayla. How do you light figures?
How do I light figures? It kind of depends. Sometimes I will follow the light source that I'm seeing if it looks cool or I like it. But you might get a situation where it's more ambient light. Then I'll tend to focus more on designing it with a simple top-down lighting. Um, so there are different lighting kind of modes you can go into. But yeah, generally it's the simpler you can keep it, the better. Unless you're, well, I guess unless you want to there's a reason you want to draw that really complex lighting. Um, but like something like this, I'm not worrying too much. There is this kind of reflected light back here, but I'm generally just keeping it to one light source, and it's mainly just to make like a clearer statement. I find that if you go too crazy, it also depends on the scope of the drawing, right? So this is kind of a quicker pose. I don't really have time to render all that, so I will opt to keep it a bit simpler. But yeah, generally the simpler the better. It will tend to read better just as a drawing.
What resources did you look into while learning hands?
Um,
Just
there is a oh, what?
nothing.
There's a book called Book of 100 Hands by George Bridgman.
Book of 100 Hands.
100 Hands. And what really helped me was copying this book cover to cover, literally every single drawing. I just spent like a week doing that. Um, and I did that twice. On top of the thing I mentioned earlier, when you're doing these figure studies, go ahead and draw the hands. Make it a habit to always include the hands in some form, even if it's just a simple kind of gesture here. And I also find that looking at animation is a good place to learn hands, because I think a lot of hand anatomy things I see, they get too in depth with all the tendons and stuff, and it becomes too much to understand how to draw like a simplified hand. So animation, look at like Milt Call draws amazing hands. Is it KHAL or KHAA? The the Disney animator guy. Maybe it's this. This looks more correct. Milt Call. So if you got like Merlin's hands from Sword of the Stone, um, I actually learned a lot in terms of drawing realistic hands actually from drawing from animation, surprisingly. Yeah, 101 Dalmatians, all those old Disney movies actually.
Can I share some interesting facts about Bridgman? I
Yeah.
I
Oh
looked
wait.
into this and I like can't believe it. He taught
Uh-huh.
so many people.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah,
Will
yeah.
Eisner came out of there. Andrew Loomis came out of Bridgman. Norman Rockwell came out of Bridgman. Like Dean Cornwell came
Yep.
out of Bridgman. Frank Riley,
Yep.
the Riley
Yep.
method. Like I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, even this guy named Lorzer Feidelson uh took Bridgman's class, and he's the guy that taught Glenn Vilppu and Harry Carmian
Wow,
and Carl Ganas and all those guys. So
that's a whole nother line.
everyone kind of touched Bridgman to some degree. Although he did say that he didn't learn anything from Bridgman, but who knows?
Or maybe it's just
Yeah.
being around all those artists at the school, right? It's the art student league in
Yeah.
New York. Yeah.
Yeah, back in the day. And that would have been an awesome experience to
I would have
visit.
failed and burned. It would have been too much pressure.
Um, all right. Well, I guess we can. I don't think I'm going to do too much more to this, but
All right, last minute question. Tips on simplifying the pelvis. Do you use a box or do you use a bucket?
I use different things actually. It kind of depends. Sometimes I'll use a bucket. Sometimes I'll use a box. Sometimes I'll use a cylinder like this. It
Mm.
it kind of depends on the model, right? Some models, like there's one model. I don't know if you guys, if you're in California and you've gone to any kind of figure drawing, you might know Sarah Streeter.
Mm.
She's this ballet dancer. But like her body, I think of more as like this.
That looked just like Sarah.
And it looks just like Sarah. Yep. So you just draw her head with, and she's always got a bun on, and you got Sarah Streeter. So eventually, what happens, the more comfortable you get with these forms, is that you can start to kind of design them, and you can use different forms for different characters or body types and things like that. So, yeah, it all just kind of depends. But generally speaking, I will say, if you're learning and try to you're figuring things out, stick with one of these two, the box or the bucket here. And I tend to prefer the box, mainly because it gets you thinking in this mode, right? You start thinking about corners and form and structure. And you can start with a bucket and turn it into a box as well, because a bucket might be easier to draw before you jump into that box, right? So anyway, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool. I guess we can call it here, unless you guys have any other questions or anything. This is a lot of fun.
I think everybody's just information overload. Favorite muscles to draw?
Favorite muscles to draw?
Oh boy, I have one. Deltoid.
Yeah,
the shoulder.
I
like
say
the
that.
shoulder.
I was thinking about
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Deltoids are always something satisfying about that. Yeah, shoulders. Gluteus maximus.
Okay, I guess we'll stop it here. Kirk, thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoy everything.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Kirk, are you teaching classes, right? So they can sign up.
Yeah, I'm taking a break for the rest of the year, but we'll start
Rest of
up
the
again
year.
next year. Yeah, I'm like so tired from work right now. So I've had to cut something out, so I have some time to myself. But
Well, you
anyway.
have I saw you sell the recordings, right? Like the lectures.
Yeah, they're audit classes. I also have like mentorship slots open if you guys are interested in that.
And that's just it's all on your website, right?
Yeah, you
Cool.
can just go to the website. Also on
I'll
YouTube,
post it.
check out. There's a ton of free videos on YouTube you guys can check out, and I stream there once in a while. So come in, say hi, and hang out.
Cool. All right, Kirk.
So-
Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, and you guys, we have Chelsea. What's next? We have
a panel
next.
coming up at 5 p.m. So that's about an hour. And it's called Failures and Lessons. And it's kind of a follow-up to our panel yesterday about how we broke into the industry. So now we're going to talk about
things we did wrong. How
Basically-
we didn't break into the industry.
things we learned
Yeah.
and red flags and how to spot them. And yeah, it should be cool.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, and then
It's,
portfolio review again at 7.
And then we're done.
And we're done.
We might have game night at 9. So
I don't
we'll
think
see.
I can handle it.
We
but
will
we'll
see. It's been a long weekend.
Cool.
All right. Thank you guys.
Awesome. Well, yeah, guys, have fun if you guys are going to that lecture, go have fun. And thanks again, Dylan and Chelsea, for having me on.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Kirk. That was really, really informative.
Yeah.
It was great.
Cool.
All right. See you guys.
See you guys
Yeah.
later.
I'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.